Welcome to the city, Mastermind City, a city filled with endless masterminds and limitless possibilities. Learn the secrets that bring business and personal success through our unique one-stop destination that gives you year-round live access to every mastermind running in the city.
And it includes live coaching, Q&As, hot seats, and more.
Hi, I'm Faye Chappell.
And I'm Stacey Maynard, and this is the Hot Topics of the Week, where we bring you a vibrant, uplifting, and inspiring conversation focused on how you can make a lasting impact for yourself and for your business.
Because the truth is, life is a marathon, not a sprint, and that's why our listeners keep coming back. For us, this is more than just a business. It's a professional community. So if you're ready to go, you're in the right place. Welcome to the city.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon.
It's something.
It's an interesting piece because I was just, we always just talk about what's been happening. And I think the last couple of weeks in our coaching, the same thing keeps coming up, right? The exact same thing. And it kind of is, how can I put it? Not annoying. No. It's just that I think everyone comes to us with they want to do, what's the latest technology and what should we be using here and how's my landing page? And then we ask them the same question, how do you describe yourself and what do you do? And then we get these big, long-winded answers that don't make any sense.
Well, it's funny because the first question we ask, right? It's like, what's the deal? Like, before we tell you like what you can use or what recommendations we have, or when we do like one-on-one and we're talking about their brand or whatever, it's like, what do you do? And their answer is, like you said, extremely long-winded. It's not clear. We have to ask a lot of follow-up questions. And then, with group coaching, we end up having other people kind of go, well, I'm not sure I understand what you do. Or like, can you make it a little like simpler for me to understand? Yes.
So I want to go back to basics, right? Yeah. I want to go back to basics. So for those of you who are watching or listening today, I'm going to ask you a question very quickly. What do you do? And if you can't answer that simply, concisely, in a matter of one sentence, then you need to forget worrying about landing pages and worrying about the latest technology and how you're going to post on social media, because if people don't understand what you do, you have a major problem, right? A major problem.
And a lot of people, unfortunately, will. Yeah, I know. And I just think a lot of people will try to overword it. I don't know, or use too many words because they think, well, if a longer explanation will help them make more sense.
Right. And I think the challenge with that is that most people think that, I need to include all these words so that I don't rule out anyone. I don't want to be a niche, wherever you're from. I don't want to limit myself because I do so many things, right? That's what everyone says. But I'm going to go back to what we always talk about when we are coaching all of our clients, whether you're a CEO or an entrepreneur who's just starting out. You want to think back to the days of, here we go, the blacksmith and the candle maker, right? Where you knew what they did. So rather than ask you what you do, I'm going to ask you a simple question. What's on your shingle, right? So what does that mean for you people that are too young to understand that? What it means is that, say you had a bricks and mortar business, right? And you hung out your shingle, your sign, and it tells people what you do. It would say lawyer, it would say doctor, it would say candlestick maker, whatever.
Baker.
But you must be able to identify. So for people like me, and I will be very honest, I'm not good at remembering people's names. I don't know why. I'm just not good at it. But I always remember what you do if it's short, right? So I will say, the girl that talked, the yoga girl, or the coach
girl
that works on e-com, whatever.
She sells T-shirts.
Yes. So if you can't say it in that little mouthful, then most people aren't going to remember you. Right. So stop using these big, huge words and this, like I help people lead stress-free lives. What the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean?
The problem is that if you're not going to come to me and say, do you know anybody that helps people lead a stress-free life?
Right.
It's not going to happen. No. I'm
what
overwhelmed. I don't know what to do, and I need help.
Right. That's what you're going to say. Yeah. I need to figure out how to reduce my stress. Do you know anyone that does anything like that? Actually, I do. I know somebody that uses meditation. I know somebody that uses fitness. I know somebody that uses nutrition or supplements or whatever it is. But no one is going to know unless you yourself know what you do.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way, because if once you understand what you do, it's like, somebody asks you a question, what do you do? But then you take it one step further and you should be able to expand on it. Mm-hmm. So if you say I'm a speaker, then it gives somebody the opportunity to go, what do you speak about? Or, you help people, I'll use your example, reduce stress. How do you do that? So when you say it succinctly, it starts a conversation that enables people to ask further questions if they're interested. If somebody says, what do you do? And you spend 2 minutes explaining it, you've lost them and they don't know what to ask because they're confused.
And that's the telltale sign, right? If you say something to somebody about what you do and they don't ask a question, that means what you told them isn't good. It isn't enough. Even if, for example, you say, I'm a lawyer. That's blank, because here's the thing. You want to be able to say, I'm a lawyer specializing in, right? Yeah. Your big frame is I'm a lawyer. Great. That will give me at least a shell of what you do, which is very important, right? Yeah. But then you can say, I'm a lawyer that, specializes in divorce law. I'm a lawyer that specializes in family law, in real estate, in corporate, because they're very, very different, right? So if I said to you, what do you do? And you say, I'm a lawyer. And I'm like, great, I really need somebody because I'm working on a real estate transaction. And then somebody would say, oh, I don't do that. Right.
But I do know somebody who does that. Yeah. And the whole concept of networking and all of that kind of stuff and getting to know other people is sometimes it's not the person in front of you that you want to have as your business. It's their network. Right. So you're networking with their network. But the problem is if you're not clear and you're confused, you say, I'm a lawyer. Oh, you don't specialize in real estate. Oh, you do family law. And as soon as somebody over here, you know what? I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday. I would love to introduce you. But if they get confused and they're lost and they don't know what to do and your message is muddled and la, 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 then it's like, do you know somebody who does this? No. I don't, because I don't know what you do.
We can't even tell you how important this is. If when you come into, for example, we have our membership, our Mastermind City Plus membership, where you have access to all these courses. The number one course we always tell you to start with is your signature message, your signature brand. Do you actually know what you do? And don't go and do a podcast and do videos and have a speaking career if you don't actually know to answer the question. And I think I don't like the fact that there's been a big disservice in the industry in these big, long things that people have been teaching you to do that says, I help this person do this, but it's always vague, right? Yeah. It's always vague. And so if you're really, really hung up on that piece, on the I help somebody do this is what I want you to try. Instead of saying that, like, let's take the stress piece. And you can simply say, when somebody says, what do? You can say, well, when people are really stressed out and they don't know what to do to get their stress level down, and the person will shake their head and say yes. Then you can say, well, I help people reduce their stress by using whatever method it is that you teach, right? So you can still use it, but use it differently. Don't be so vague. And unfortunately, the majority of the entrepreneurial training has taught people to be vague, right?
Well, and unfortunately, they've taught the vagueness purposely, which I don't agree with, but they did it because they said, if you're vague and you give them sort of I help people do something random, and you sort of talk in flowery words, the concept that they teach is you want to do that so they will ask questions.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it backfires because I don't know what question to ask because I don't know what you do, and now I'm confused. And if I'm confused, I shut down. I'm not interested in continuing the conversation. I'm not interested in asking more questions. But if you tell me what you do simply and I go, oh, can you tell me more about that? Or, oh, that sounds really interesting. And, oh, can you give me more information? Or, how do you incorporate that or whatever? Then you can give me, a little bit more of a detailed answer, but the vagueness doesn't get you anywhere.
No, and I think, we see it every single week. So every week in our Mastermind City Plus membership, we have coaching every Wednesday. And every Wednesday, I think, absolutely every single week, we always ask somebody, what do they do? And every single week, someone tells us something different, the same person, right? Like, so it's always but here's the thing. And we don't preface it. We don't say, hey, we're going to talk about this today. We just say, hey, what do you do? So that there's no time to rehearse. And that's the important part, right? So you need to ensure that you can answer the question regardless of where you are. Now, before we go a little further, some of you guys are going to say the same thing. You're going to say, I do a lot of things. Great. So you need to have an answer based on the situation you are in, right? So if you're talking to a specific group, one of the things you do is targeted to them, then stick with that one thing, right? And if I know that I'm an event that I know there are people that want to learn how to speak on stage, I would tell them I'm a master speaker trainer, right? I wouldn't talk about anything else I do. I would give them what I believe they need. If I wasn't in that group and I was in another group that was more corporate based, I would say I work on brand strategy. That's a different, do I still do speaking? Sure, but I'm not going to muddy the water and tell them I do other stuff because it's not relevant. So you must read the room and understand what you should say. So what happens, Stacey, saying all that, what do you do if you're going to now have to do a profile on one of your social media posts?
Right. That ends up getting very confused. So if you say let's just take LinkedIn for an example. And what ends up happening is they'll do the laundry list. That's what I call the laundry list effect. The laundry list is, I do this, and this, because they don't want to close a door and they don't want to alienate anybody that could be a potential customer. Well, the problem is they don't understand how to work with you. So going back to your example, if you're talking to CEOs and you're having those conversations and you say you're a brand strategist, well, speaking is incorporated in there. And later on in the conversation, when you get into the services and you get into those discussions and you go, oh, by the way, I also do speaker training. Like, oh, great. You know what? We've been really looking at adding that to our brand. That becomes a complementary service, but it's not one that you lead with. So understanding the audience, and that goes with all profiles, that goes with bios, like the laundry list of, I am a blah, 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 blah. Could you do other things? Absolutely. But if I'm like you, if I'm talking to entrepreneurs and we're having conversations and I've been to a couple of podcast launch parties and people are like, what do you do? Well, I'm a podcast producer. Oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that? Ends up being, there's my shingle for that particular event, right? Or I'll say, social media strategy, or I'll say, we have a community hub where we actually have a lot of different courses and we bring a lot of people in. So people are, okay, that makes sense, right? Yeah. But if I gave you the laundry list, you wouldn't even know where to start with a question.
No. And we teach a lot about signature message and branding. And I used to call one of the workshops, what's on your shingle, right?
Yes.
Because basically it asks that question. If you can't answer, it's a problem. So we know that this is the core piece. There's two things: understanding your brand message, or who you are and what you do, and understanding how to translate that to your social media profiles, because let's face it, that's where people recognize you the most, right? So I'm getting a little plug here for those of you who aren't with us. We have a networking component to Mastermind City Plus, and each month we do a deep dive masterclass. And so in April, it's about your shingle, your brand message, your signature message. And then in May, it's about translating that to all your social media profiles. So even if you're not a Mastermind City Plus member, you want to join us in those two master classes, you can go to the network. Stacey will put the link there somewhere. You can go to that and sign up for those particular 1-hour workshops. There's live Q&As, but you know what? If you don't have to come, but you have to be able to answer the question. If you can answer the question, I suggest you come to our training or someone else's, but you are going to be spinning your wheels if you don't know what's on your shingle.
Sure. Absolutely. And we still have a signature program that we developed a few years back, which is called the Global Impact Accelerator. Mm-hmm. And Faye and I sat down and we kind of went through what are the 8 things, sort of high level topics that we're going to teach. And then we're going to do full courses under those 8 buckets. Right. And we had the conversation of what was going to be first, second, and third. We had to put them in an order because it was a program where you started here and you went through them in a very strategic order. And number 1 was signature message. And we wanted to ensure that that was ahead of the social media module. It was ahead of the speaking module. It was ahead of the podcast module, the video module, the digital product module. Simply because if you did not have that down, doing a podcast, doing videos, doing your social media profiles, creating your signature speech, even creating your online digital product, your courses, none of that would even matter because you're not going to be able to get listeners. You're not going to have people watching if your signature message was not the most important, like if it was not down and it was not succinct.
It's interesting because a lot of people come to us and right away they're like, oh, I want to launch my podcast or I want to do my YouTube channel. And we're like, great. What do you do? And if you don't know it, it doesn't make any sense. Because think about if you launched a podcast, how many people come to you and say, I want to launch a podcast tomorrow? Great. What's it about? And they're like, I'm not sure. I just want to launch a podcast. But it's got to work with what you do. So pick a lane. And so some of you want to do a podcast, right? But you're like, well, I do 5 different things. What am I going to do it on? Maybe I can incorporate it all. No.
Please don't. I beg you.
No one can
from
understand.
The bottom of my heart. And that's why when I do the services, when I actually do podcast production, we start with a strategy call. Because we're going to ask you, what do you do and what lane do you want to be in? And I think there was one where I was like, so what are you thinking? Like, what are you thinking of your title is going to be? And she's like, oh, well, I don't know. Like, because again, you have so many things and all of that kind of stuff. It ends up being like, that's why a lot of people do the and then their name, the show.
Right.
And that's fine.
It still has to be about something though.
Exactly.
Right?
There still has to be a description that makes sense.
Like if it's just generic rambling, okay. If you're just talking about entrepreneurship in general, okay. But that's fine if that's what you're talking about. But at the end of the day, a podcast is there for you to be able to sell something or gain visibility or sell books or gain track, whatever it is. Yeah. So at the end of the day, that has to work with what you're doing, right?
And just imagine if you go on stage, like just say you have a speaking engagement, and I know a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, corporate want to do, more speaking and all the kind of stuff. So now just imagine you're going out on stage and you've given them your bio and the person goes, well, let me introduce this person. And then next, but you're only talking about this one specific thing. that relates to this topic. So you also have to think about that piece and how muddled all of a sudden your expertise is as you're walking out on stage.
Well, here's my favorite. Okay. Here's my favorite thing that so I want you guys who are listening to really think about this. Okay. Let's say you are going on stage to speak, or you're a guest on a podcast. Okay. Either way, it's you speaking. You've probably written out your bio and it might be really long and you've given it to them. And then the MC or the host says, introduce yourself instead of reading your bio. If you can't introduce yourself because it's not all written, we have a problem. Houston, we have a problem.
Houston, we have a big problem.
So
they set out and they're lost.
You need to be able to, on a dime, flip it, because guess what happens? It does happen in real life. Yeah, sometimes you go to a podcast and they would say, oh, just introduce yourself, it'd be easier. Same thing as if you have a MC who's not so good, right? Yeah. And maybe they only read and they don't want to read, or they lost their card or whatever. They might say, say your name and say, let us hear what you do for us. And then you're stuck.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And it's not about memorization. It's about really, truly understanding what you do, how you help people, what products you offer, whatever it is. You must understand that at a basic level. Or if you can't answer the question, you've no business being on camera. You've no business going to a networking event. If you can't, and you've no business to help people do anything, because you need, even if it's as simple as, I own a gift shop, right?
Yeah.
Great. You own a gift shop. People can understand that. They can visualize it and get it. That can be vague in a term. It's specific, it's vague, but it makes sense because that shingle says gift shop.
Exactly.
Right? And people have an idea of what they're going to get when they walk in your door. Exactly. So we can't even stress enough how important this is. Honestly, if you can join us at the event, join us. It's 60 minutes of your time. And by the end of it, you will have all the tools you need to be able to answer the question. If you can't make it, then Google it. Look at other people's bios. Look at, go to LinkedIn or go to Instagram, see what their bios say. And some of them, some of the bios are kind of generic-y in terms of, I love cats. Okay. Great. But what does that mean?
Right? And maybe it's just for fun and all of that kind of stuff. And that's okay too. Mm-hmm. But just going back to the being able to introduce yourself on a show, unfortunately, I have seen it from a podcast perspective. I've seen it when you introduce yourself and all of a sudden they start sort of, just stuttering through like, right. Well, I do this. So, what do you think your audience would like to hear about? And maybe it's this part, and they don't know and they get confused. Well, what does that do immediately is your credibility goes down. So the opportunity that you have to get in front of all of these people is now diminished because you're unable to express in simplistic terms what you do so that the rest of the show they'll actually listen to. And unfortunately, the drop-off rate is very high when that happens. And
and a lot of people will say to us, but I'm not confident enough. Well, here's the thing. Confidence comes from knowing your material, right? Confidence comes from knowing what you do, how you help people, what you sell, what you do. That's when you get confident, right? So think about a time when you're talking, for example, whatever you do for a living, when you're talking and you're in that groove, you're in that groove and you're talking to them and everything's great and you feel very confident, it's because you know your stuff. Yeah. So at the very least, you should know what you do, and then the confidence will flow out of you and you don't have to worry about, I'm too afraid to go to a networking event and, say what I do. That's what it's about. That's what it's about.
Thanks for joining us here at the Mastermind City. You don't have to say goodbye because there are other ways that you can join us. If you like what you've heard today, then join our professional networking community, and it's absolutely free, where you can be part of our global community to build relationships, grow your business, and access live training or learn more about how you can get year-round access to not only us, but to all our endless masterminds.
So just go to themastermind.city and we'll see you in the city.